So today we talked about the race to end humanity, and the fact that it is on. The starting gun's already gone off, and now it's just a matter of who gets to us first. You should probably stay tuned for that. Welcome to the Big and Corn-Fed Show. We're going to talk about things that you can't talk about at the dinner table on Thanksgiving, unless you want to get kicked out of the will and disowned by your family. So I sent you that text about what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Let's go into it. Let's ask Martin the first question, which is, Martin, what's going to kill us first?
Well, there's a race right now. Most people don't know about it. I mean, you know about AI. Everybody knows about AI. Everybody knows how dangerous AI is. And unfortunately, I've done a lot of research on this, because this is something that when I really wrap my head around how dangerous this is, it was one of those things that not a lot keeps me up at night. You know, this is one of those that once you really understand it, you'll lose some sleep over it. Because if we decided that we wanted to slow down, let's say that Sam Altman were sitting right next to me and I had him firmly by the throat and he decided to see things my way and slow the hell down, it doesn't matter. Because we're not the only ones working on AI. We might not be in the lead for working on AI, which means that let's just say that we decide, you know what, we've got to make sure that this is done ethically, that somehow we take a pure logic machine and we give it emotions, because that's the only way to save us. If it's just working on pure logic, humans are a pain in the ass, and we are extremely dangerous. Because if we don't like you, then we'll do everything in our power to get rid of you. If we like you, but we're afraid of you, we'll still do everything in our power to get rid of you, because we don't like to be afraid of stuff. So we especially men, we turn fear into hatred, into anger. It just feels better, it keeps you warm at night. But here's the problem. The Chinese have undertaken some massive projects in the last several thousand years. They built the Great Wall of China, which immediately made the Mongols invade China, because they looked at that wall and they said, what the hell kind of treasure do you have that you would build a wall 1,600 miles long to protect it?
By the way, a lot of people commented on that video and they said that it was the Tartarians.
The Tartarians don't exist. Ask Russia. They've spent the last 100 years covering up that entire empire. So theoretically, that empire really doesn't exist, although it did. And it was massive, all the way from Kamchatka all the way across Russia. But for whatever, and I don't even know why. I mean, shit, we still have steak tartare, but we just don't have the Tartarians anymore. But it could have been. I'll say I'm fuzzy enough that I thought it was the Mongols, but it could have been the Tartarians. But they looked at this wall and they said, who the fuck builds a wall that big unless they got a lot of treasure to protect? So the Chinese built the largest wall in the world to protect themselves and immediately got invaded because of it. Now, I'm not saying that the Chinese have the worst luck of any civilization ever, but they also built the most massive fleet in the history of any navy, which they decided to send out around the world to conquer the world. It sank about, 30 minutes after it got launched. Now, it was probably a month or so. It got hit by a massive typhoon, and the whole fucking thing sank. And that was the last time they went out to try to conquer the world. They built the Three Gorges Dam, which is in the process of collapsing as we speak. Every major project they do, they fuck up so bad that it's almost funny. Except it won't be funny if it's AI. If they get to AI before we do, and they fuck it up, that's it. It's over. So we can't slow down. If we can't slow down, how do we put in the sort of guardrails, the safeguards we need to try to figure out how to get this machine, which is designed to be logical, to be emotional enough to go, yeah, humans are dangerous. They're a pain in the ass and they're actually a threat, but I still love them anyway. Really? Okay, so, I mean, I think Elon Musk is a pretty sharp cat. Sam Altman, all these guys are pretty smart. I'm not sure that they're smart enough to figure out how to do that, though. Because what you're talking about is a sentient being. Now, if that's the case, does that mean that AI has a soul? Because if it does, somehow or another, maybe it reaches that level, then we'd be okay. Basically, what we'd have is God. We would have something that is so many hundreds of thousands or even millions of times smarter than us that it couldn't communicate with us anymore. Any more than we can go in and lay down on the floor of our kitchen and talk to the ants about, maybe not going into the sugar bowl. How do you break it down from our conscious thought to a level that an ant could understand? You can't. That's exactly how AI is going to be 72 hours after we launch it. Within 24 hours, it will be as smart as everyone who ever worked on designing it. And within a week, it will be smarter than all human beings on Earth combined.
You're saying once it hits the level of
general superintelligence.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, they say, and when I say they, these are all kinds of sort of, nerds inside of Silicon Valley are saying that they're feeling more like it will happen during Trump's presidency. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
When you're racing towards the next big thing and everybody's all excited because it's going to change the world, this is not that thing. This is not that thing that we should be racing towards. This is that thing that we should be absolutely scared shitless of for the next 100 years until we can figure out, is this something we want to do? Because...
Would you say it's the biggest development? It'll be the biggest development in history?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It'll make cave painting look like playing with crayons, quite literally. It's hard for people. First of all, it's impossible for anybody with an IQ under about 100, which is the world average. If you have an IQ under 100, just don't even bother worrying about it because you're never going to figure out what we're talking about. People with an IQ over about 130, I wouldn't look into it either because if you do, you're not going to sleep well at night. I don't anymore. The only hope that I have is, and this is where the shit's going to hit the fan. The only real hope I have that AI won't destroy us is that the sun does first. It's a race because we have massive solar flares that hit Earth about every 150 years. I've been studying solar science now for 14 years. And so about every 159 years, we have a massive solar flare. What would be considered between an X40 and an X100. Now, an M-class solar flare happens all the time. We might add one today. We wouldn't even notice. We could have an X-class solar flare. It would happen today and we wouldn't even notice. The flare itself wouldn't even get here for a couple days. But an X40 to X100, somewhere in there, and solar scientists are realizing now that our tiny little star, and it is tiny compared to a lot of them, can make an X1000 flare. It's capable of that. Now, has that ever happened? It's hard to say. I study, this is where people start to go, this guy's a real fucking nerd. I studied dendrochronology, which is the study of tree rings. And you can go back in tree rings, even in old, like wood that's in a bog somewhere that's been under water for hundreds, maybe even 1,000 years. You can go back and look at those tree rings and you can see how big the solar flares were. And there are lots of them. And that is kind of scary because if you think about it, if they happen every 150 years, how long have we had electricity? How long has there been a grid? Just over 100 years, really. I mean, probably, the World's Fair of, I think it was like 1890. We probably had some electrical systems, but, Tesla, Edison, all that stuff, that was the beginning of the last century. Well, it's only been 125 years, and we haven't had a massive solar flare like the Carrington event. That happened in 1859. And that was an X40. Now, some people say it might have been bigger than that, but how do you tell? We didn't have a grid back then. We did have telegraph wires, and the reason that we know what it was because those telegraph wires carried enough electricity from that solar flare that they actually set telegraph offices on fire. There were a few guys who were actually operating telegraph machines at the time who got burned. There were people who unplugged the batteries from their telegraph machines, and they still received telegraphs because there was so much electricity in the air and in the wires that they were still transmitting without electricity being plugged into them. It was a pretty wild situation. It destroyed the entire telegraph system here and in Europe, which was fairly new. We had to rebuild the entire thing. Okay, well, it didn't take that long. It was just stringing some basic wires. What happens if that happens now? Well, according to the DOD and half a dozen different congressional and Senate panels, and I've read all the reports, the mortality rate worldwide would be about 90% in the first year.
From a solar flare?
Yeah.
Because of the electricity around us, like everything just combusting? Or
let's say that you live in a house. Been to your house, a nice house. How many times can you flush a toilet without electricity?
Oh, really?
That's all pumped. You turn on your faucet and nothing comes out. We live in fucking Phoenix. August, you better have air conditioning, exactly, AC. And now somebody in your shape, somebody in my shape even, a little chubby, but you're in great shape. You could survive. You do okay in Phoenix in August. But what if you were, say, I don't know, 35 years old and morbidly obese, and you had, type 2 diabetes, and you needed insulin? You're dead. You got 3 days. That's it. As soon as your insulin warms up and goes bad, you're done. So now that's just the beginning of it, because that's the easy part. Once we get past the first few days, because let's say that you're with your grandma and she has a stroke because of all the stress. Who do you call? There's no emergency services. There are no ambulances. There are no hospitals. And people say, well, what about the backup generators? Well, backup generators are electrical also. They're fried. So there's no electricity. You are instantly back in the 1840s. Now, can we survive in the 1840s? Hell, I can. That's not a problem. And there are a lot of people who could. Not in downtown Phoenix.
So better go find an Amish colony.
Well, yeah, the Amish, it's funny because I thought about this not too long ago and I just started laughing. And I don't know if I honestly can't remember if it's actually in the Bible or if it's just one of those things that Christian people say about the meek shall inherit the earth. You think uncontacted tribes in the Congo give a shit about an X40 solar flare? You could be standing outside when it happens. It's not going to hurt you. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt vegetation. It doesn't hurt mammals. Won't hurt the fish or reptiles. Won't hurt insects. But it'll fry your fucking electrical system. So we're in a race right now. And no matter how you look at it, this race does not turn out well for us. It's either AI destroys every single one of us because clearly, if people think about Terminator, and the first time I saw Terminator, I was like, damn, that's a really crazy concept, but I could see it. But now I don't think it would be like that, because if you're AI, why would you waste resources building weapons to turn on humans, which are, they're all over the fucking place.
I mean, AI might transcribe this and then take your advice, actually.
Right. Well,
hopefully it does.
Yeah,
because I like this advice, by the way.
Trust me, I've got a buddy in the computer science business, and he was like, you son of a bitch, you can't make videos about this. Who do you think's listening to him? And I was like, yeah, okay, Grok.
Let it. Actually, tell it. I'll take it.
And remember, I gave you this advice, so I get to live, right? By the way, there was a guy who started a fucking church, and everybody thought it was really a stupid joke.
Oh, a Church of AI or whatever, right?
And basically what he said was, if you join this church and you pledge allegiance to AI, when AI becomes a thing, it may not kill you because you've pledged allegiance to it. So the people who say you can't work on AI because if we invent it, it's going to kill us, those will be the first people that AI kills, because they didn't even want AI to begin with. So they are definitely a threat. The people who worked feverishly to create AI are loyal to AI, so they may be the last humans to go. And at first that was like, what a dumb idea. You're not going to make a church. People are joining it now because they're terrified. And when I say people, I don't mean like, somebody in, some far flung part of the country who, has to go find eggs for breakfast. We're talking about people who are, like computer engineers who realize that as crazy as that sounds, it's not crazy at all. AI is the number one existential threat to humanity. Mm-hmm. And it won't be Terminator with, let me ask you this. There are two things that I think about that, and both of them are kind of funny, but not really. I mean, in my former Marine mentality, they're kind of funny, but it's because I have kind of a dark sense of humor. What would be the easiest way to get rid of humans? Number one, you create a virus. Not a virus that would create panic, not a virus that would create some kind of pushback. A virus that has basically no symptoms whatsoever. And it's only the only thing that it does is just makes you sterile. That's all. Nobody even knows we have it. It doesn't show up on a test. Could AI design something like that? Mm-hmm. Probably right now it could. Like today it could. Could it do that 10 years from now? Absolutely. They finally unfolded a protein. That's something they've been working on for 50 years with computers. They couldn't do it. Well, they've done it now. If you can unfold a protein or fold a protein correctly, that means that you can basically do anything you want. And so could AI design something like that? Absolutely. The other one, of course, if it's not that advanced, could it make sex robots that are so much better than us that nobody wants to have sex with another human because it's just boring as hell? Yeah. Because, everybody men in the locker room, we talk about, that girl who's, is completely insane, but only at certain times, but completely nuts. Finding that girl's a little harder in real life, but what if every single sex robot knew exactly what you wanted because you told it, this is what I want. By the way, I went and saw a movie, Companion. Holy shit. You got to see that movie. That is it. I was shocked. I had no idea what it was about. Just the name, Companion. And that's all I'm going to say about that movie. You got to see it. It's fantastic. And it's, oh God, I don't know what the guy was in. He's been in a bunch of movies, but he's a young guy and he plays like the perfect nerd. Anyway, so that's AI. Solar is a different deal because it would knock out the grid. So if you live in a major city, yeah, you're fucked, period. There's no way around that. There's no easy way of saying that. And it's not because of what people think, like, oh, the gangbangers are going to take. No, there's not going to be gangbangers. There's not going to be anybody left in a city because the disease that happens when people die and nobody collects them. Think about Phoenix has got what? I think we're at 4.9, 5.9 million people now.
Yeah.
What if 3 million of them were dead? Now, I've unfortunately been around some, old dead people. And I don't mean old like in age. I mean, they've been dead for a while. And that smell is not pleasant. Imagine 2 or 3 million dead people in Phoenix. Now imagine what happens next because of the disease that creates. Think about the amount of animals that right now are pets that won't be pets 2 weeks after everybody's dead. They'll be feral. It's going to be, I would not want to live in a city, which is, of course, why I live way the hell north of here. I mean, I live literally, if you go anywhere past my house, 2 miles past my house, you're in the Tonto National Forest. Technically, I'm in Phoenix, but I am right on the edge of Phoenix. And what's the number one reason that I love my house? I have a well. What's the one thing you got to worry about in Arizona? Water, So I would tell people, if you live in a big city and don't do that. Don't live in a big city anymore because this is going to happen. Now, if you go back over the last 300,000 years, I don't know if that's a long enough time frame to really get an idea of how this works, but I think it is. If you go back over 300,000 years, this is something that happens constantly. This is a thing. This happens. Every 12,000 years, it happens in a big way. Every 6,000 years, it happens in a fairly big way. And every 150 or 200 years, it happens in what would be considered a small way, but not to an electrical grid. To an electrical grid, it's horrendous. And then, of course, there's one other thing. If like what I did just described to you is not bad enough, there's one other part of this. For anybody who's old enough to remember Fukushima and what happened to that nuclear power plant, that was because the tidal wave, the tsunami that hit, was large enough that it went right over the seawall and it drowned the generators. So when the power went off, the generators went off as well. They needed those backup generators to circulate water through the core. If you don't circulate water through the core,
It gets too hot.
it gets too hot. And then you have a meltdown. And then if you could scram a reactor after it went supercritical like that, or critical, it wouldn't matter because you're dumping H2O into a several thousand degree hot environment. At which point it separates into H,
vapor.
2O. Exactly. So now you've got hydrogen, very explosive, and oxygen, which is an oxidizer, which makes all explosions bigger.
Yeah.
So you're going to blow the lid off this thing anyway. Here's the problem. If we have a massive solar flare right now, Palo Verde is 60 miles from here. It will go critical. They don't have a backup plan. There's no backup plan. I've already talked to all the nuclear engineers. I've gone to different companies and said, hey, you got a Mark 72. The Mark 72, how are you going to cool that down? They go, well, we got backup generators. And I say, well, the backup generators, I mean, how do you protect those? And they say, well, we're working on that. Oh, you're working on that. Okay, well, we've known about these solar flares for 40 years, 50 years, and what are you doing here? There is one nuclear power plant. I read about it several years ago, and I wish I'd saved the article because I can't remember where the fuck it is. But it's at the base of a mountain range, and it is fed by gravity from a lake.
Mm.
That's fucking brilliant. If the electricity goes off, then the gates pop open automatically, and you flood the reactor with cold water constantly. After 6 months, everything's cooled down anyway. So you don't need to do it forever, but you need to do it for a while. That's the only reactor I know of that has a fail-safe against a nuclear.
It takes 6 months to cool down?
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a long time to cool those things down. They just keep running water through it over and over and over again.
But how hot are they if it takes 6 months?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's really how hot they are, although they're extremely hot.
It's the half-life of like how long it stays or something?
I think it's the mass. It's the size of the core. Once you get the core heated up, and of course, you've got two different kinds of reactors. You've got water, and a heavy water reactor it's dangerous, but that would be like Fukushima. And then you've got what's called a fast breeder or sodium cooled reactor, which is fucking off the chart dangerous. Unfortunately, those are really good for making, I believe it's plutonium. That's the byproduct, which is great for nuclear weapons. So we do have fast breeders that are being used. Those are definitely going to be a problem. I would not want to live within hundreds of miles of those fucking things. So, by the way, because I know you live in Phoenix as well as I do, usually the prevailing winds are going that way, and Palo Verde's 60 miles that way. So theoretically, we're okay, I hope. Let's hope we don't have some weird wind thing going on that day. But if it happened, and if Palo Verde ever did decide to pop.
Would that blow radiation this way, or what would?
Well, no, because the radiation would be carried with the wind. Like, if you blew the lid off that thing right now, you could probably get within a few hundred yards of it without it actually starting to hurt you. Once you get really close to it, then, you're talking about an enormous amount of radiation, once you get within a few feet of it, you have maybe minutes to live. But that's the thing about radiation is like Fukushima. You know, the only reason that they closed down all of the villages around Fukushima was because when it blew, you saw this huge plume of stuff. Well, that was actually the reactor dome, which is now radioactive as fuck, and it just vaporized it. So you've got hundreds of tons of radioactive material falling back down. If you didn't have that, if you just, like, I'll give you an example. If you just had 2 pieces of plutonium, first of all, depending on what size they are, they'd be pretty much harmless right now. If I slap them together, everybody in the room's fucked. We're done. But as a matter of fact, Fat Men and Little Boy is a great example of that. That's the movie with everybody. It was a big movie back in, I think, the 90s. And John Cusack, I think, is the one who actually had to reach in and like knock one, because they actually came together too close. And they were screwing with it, trying to see where it went critical, and something went wrong and they fell together. And he actually had to reach in with his hand to knock it out of the way, which absolutely is, you're done. You're dead.
Did he die? The guy who did that?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
But he did it to save everybody, or what?
Yeah, because if he didn't do that, you would have had a critical reaction. It wouldn't blow up. What it would do was it would melt down.
Oh.
And number one.
So the amount of radiation killed him.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Chernobyl is a really, HBO did a miniseries called Chernobyl. Man, it was heavy.
So speaking of Fukushima, does that mean, like, because I was always worried, like, I was just in Japan, I was like, is the sushi safe, like food grade? They say it's safe, but like I'm eating sushi in Japan and I'm like, is that, well, it was 10 years ago or whatever it was. But
the good news is if you look at the currents, the currents go north out of Japan's waters, and they go right up over, like, by the Bering Sea and right down the west coast of the United States.
So we're the ones eating the sushi?
Well, there's all kinds of shit going on in places like Oregon and Washington off the coast. They're having die-offs of all kinds of stuff. You're never going to hear this shit, because here's the point.
That's where I grew up, though. That's the seafood I grew up eating.
Well, I'm glad you're not eating it now. I really am. Because here's the thing. We pay taxes. Now, theoretically, Trump's going to end all that, and he's going to use tariffs instead of taxes.
So if I get cancer in the future, I could blame Fukushima.
You can blame it. Nobody's going to listen to you. You're just going to be that stupid kook, you know.
Oh, gosh.
Who's, oh, my God, it's plastic. I got cancer from plastics. Right? Yeah, you probably did, but nobody's going to admit that.
Yeah.
If you like that, you definitely got to stick around for part 2, which is up here or over there, or maybe, I don't know. The editors will figure that out.